Welcome to the Win Win Evangelism Podcast. I'm Tina Waldrom from Evangelism in Australia. Well, I love helping you feel confident and inspired to share Jesus naturally and consistently. Before today's interview, I want to let you know about our free download that will help you answer the hard questions that non-Christians have about faith. You can download that for free on our website, evangelisminaustralia.com. Well, today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Nalini Tranquim, who's a Christian speaker, author and communicator, passionate about identity, freedom and helping people bring those hidden issues into the light. Today we're going to talk about who gets to define me and how Christians can have a meaningful conversation about identity with people who don't follow Jesus yet. It's going to be fascinating. Welcome to you, Nalini.
Thank you so much, Tina. I'm excited.
It's wonderful to have you along. And just quickly, where's the accent from? Because you've got a kind of a mixed accent going on there. I've talked to you before the show, but just so that our listeners know.
Yeah, the accent is a bit of a mess, I must admit. So I was born in India. I have an Indian father and a British mother, and then grew up actually in Zimbabwe. So you will hear a bit of a Zimbabwean twang, but lived many years in London and have been in Australia for quite some time as well. So yes, you're going to get all of it today.
Tell us briefly about your journey and why identity has become such an important part of your ministry.
Wow. Okay. So when we were living in London, I was part of, my husband and I were part of a grassroots church. A pastor and his wife had moved to London from South Africa, and they invited us to their church service. Now, my husband and I had been out of the church scene for a few years, past hurt and what have yous. And so it was quite a big stepping back into the church arena again. And so grudgingly and of necessity, we decided to go after many invitations. And oh my goodness, just got hit by the presence of God on service one. And we just plugged in from that moment on. And throughout the first 4 years or so of being a part of this church, I got heavily involved in the worship team. And I just loved it. We just saw God move powerfully, and it was magnificent. And then after about 4 years, the senior pastor sat me down and said, listen, we're growing at exponential pace. How would you feel about actually coming on staff and being a part of this from the inside? And so, of course, didn't hesitate. I was like, yes, I'm there. So signed contracts. And overnight, something flipped in my pastor. And I stepped into 3 years of the worst narcissistic abuse I have ever experienced in my life. Verbal and psychological abuse in front of staff, in front of congregational members, on my own sometimes, but it was daily. And that daily impact began stripping away at who I was and who I saw myself as. And so after that 3-year term, I actually found myself at the point of suicide. And it was only at that moment that my husband realized the severity of the damage that was being done. And he got on his knees before God to seek the Lord for solution as to what we do. And the Lord plucked us out and relocated us to Western Australia, middle of nowhere, to recover, to heal.
Wow. I did not expect for you to say that. I'm sorry that was your story, but thankful that it's actually you've been able to lean into that, and obviously the ministry and what you're doing now is very effective. So why is the question, who am I, so significant for people today?
It's so significant if you want to function in the fullness of what God put you on this earth to be. Because by the time I arrived in Western Australia, I had no idea of who I was. I arrived broken and disgruntled. I had had lies spoken over me for 3 consecutive years that had become truth to me, primarily because of his position of authority in my life. And so what he said carried immense weight. So by the time we arrive on the Western Australian shores, I don't know who I am as a wife. I don't know who I am as a mother. I felt less than in every facet of my life, felt like I had completely messed up my calling, because now I'm left with nothing outside of it all. But I felt like the Spirit of God wanted to take me on this journey of discovering who I was deep down in Him, outside of title, position, and responsibility. And so I ended up on this journey of self-discovery. Who am I, Lord? What did you put me on this earth to fulfill and to accomplish? And what have I got on the inside of me that equips me and prepares me to be able to do that work? And then as I went on this journey for myself of realizing, oh my goodness, I've just built these walls, around me to try and self-protect. As the Lord started doing this deep healing work on the inside of me, the walls began to fall and the real Nalini woke up again, and was being restored and renewed and healed. And then after that, I stepped into the coaching arena and discovered countless women experiencing the exact same issues. I've been through trauma, I've been through abuse, I've been through stuff, and it's affected how I see myself. And so I'm functioning as a shell of my true self, not in the fullness of my true self. So you unlock identity. Oh my goodness, you unlock mandate, you unlock calling at a whole different level.
Yeah, very powerful. Very, very powerful. What are some of the things that people commonly use to define their identity?
That's an interesting question.
I mean, sometimes, like from your story, just listening to it, we can use the ministry for those that have been involved in ministry for a long time, whether yours was a bad experience, whatever the experience, their identity can come out of that. What are the other things that people use to define their identity? I guess we could say vocation may be one of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do tie their identity in what they do. There would have been an element of that even with me, that when I lost my job, as it were, as a worship director, well, then who am I now if I don't have my job? And yet God has intrinsically created within us gifts and talents and purpose and mandate to fulfill on this earth that supersedes any function that we do in our day-to-day, be it motherhood, be it fatherhood, be it, ministry or being in the marketplace. But I think there is this idea that I am what I do.
Yes, and I would imagine I am what I do. Is it as significant with women as men? What would be your observation?
I think there's less questioning around identity to a certain degree with men who are functioning in the slipstream of what they're good at, as opposed to women who quite often battle with imposter syndrome, for instance. That's probably been one of the biggest lessons I've learned along the way as I've worked with women is, am I even worthy of doing what I am currently doing? Am I even worthy of the boardroom? Do I really have a voice, and does my voice matter? Does it actually carry weight? Whereas I've experienced less of that level of questioning with men than I have come across with women.
Yeah, very interesting. If a non-Christian, let's talk about, say, the non-Christians in our world. If a non-Christian says to me or says to you or someone listening today, I don't really know who I am anymore, which I do have conversations with many of my friends. I don't really know who I am anymore. How would a Christian best respond to that?
Yeah, I love throwing the question back at them. well, what do you love to do? And what do what lights you up on the inside? What brings you joy and fulfillment? What are some of those things? Because quite often, and I've seen this in my own life, those things that bring us that innate joy and excitement to get out of bed in the morning is directly linked to how God has created us and what he's formed us to do and outwork, whether Christian or non, And so I quite often throw that question back, and it just gets their mind ticking on the possibilities. And, what are some of the things? I've been stuck in a dead-end job for so long that's just become my norm. And I don't come home fulfilled at the end of the day. In fact, I don't even want to wake up in the morning because I'm finding it so drudgy, And so I like to provoke with those kinds of questions of possibility to be able to unlock things that have maybe been buried on the inside in terms of their own way of thinking, that just sparks that curiosity again of, actually, do you know what? As a little girl, I loved to dance. That was like my one thing. And I always wanted to become a dancer. Mom put me through dance school, absolutely loved it. But then, kids came along, life got in the way, ended up in a job, and I've just kind of settled, and then I'll go a little bit deeper. Oh, okay. So is it possibly time to put the dancing shoes back on again? And then as they start taking these steps towards doing things that bring that innate joy, suddenly now doors start opening that are, for some quite unexpected. And you actually see them stepping into this life of more than just the humdrum.
Yes. Okay, so that's a great answer, because sometimes if someone asks that question, you can think, are we expecting them to completely change their vocation, which on most occasions, Nalini, is unrealistic. But if they can step into some of those things, like you're saying, that they start exploring dance or whatever it is, that's just our working example. But if those doors, I love that you said, if those doors start to unexpectedly open, they've got some of these things going alongside of their vocation that they may be stuck in now, but they are starting to discover who they are.
Yes, absolutely. And it also then actually makes the drudge of the 9 to 5, if I'm really struggling with that, so much more bearable, because there's things that I'm doing that I am passionate about. Yeah, the things that you're passionate about are the things that we want to really draw out of people so that we can start turning the lights back on, bringing that sense of hope for tomorrow again. Because then over time, as they're seeing those momentary transitions taking place within their life, we're going to then earn the right to open up the conversation in the spirit realm now. We have to earn that right. And I'm a big advocate for friendship evangelism, as we just start to feed into small changes within their everyday life that we can sow into and speak into as they start to see this awakening taking place on the inside of themselves. They're going to be that much more open to the conversation of Jesus later down the line.
Yes, because what we're saying is if you ask the right questions, like you're saying, to that person, when they're saying, I don't really know who I am anymore, we're asking the questions from our Christian perspective and our Christian fundamental position that we believe that, people are made uniquely by God to actually contribute to their communities, contribute to where they're living, etc. Don't forget our free download that will help you answer the hard questions that people have about faith. Also, you can grab a free trial of our Share Jesus membership. You can find out more about that at sharejesus.com.au. How do you make that connection, like to introduce them to a thought that maybe it is God who has wired them a certain way, without going full scale talking about the gospel, but just those little steps forward to introduce the concept or the thought of God?
Yeah, look, it's different depending on the circumstance. I'll just give you one illustration because I've had relationships with people where it's been over weeks and months, where they'll throw a question like, why have you got so much joy on the inside of you? You just seem to exude this joy. Where is it coming from? And then that's an opportunity for me to introduce them to the love of Jesus and the transformational power that I've experienced through him. But then there's been other times where, for example, this thought just came to me while you were asking the question. I was at the gym randomly the other day and noticed this lady coming in for the class, very heavy laden. I could see she was really battling. There was like this sense of depression on her and just hopelessness. I really felt it in my own body. And I was like, Lord, what do you want me to do with that? Because I don't really know her. And, I can't exactly go up to her and I see you've got depression. Can I pray for you? So I brought it before the Lord and I just said, Father, if you need me to do anything, I need you to make that known and just give me the wisdom to know how. At the end of the class, I left the class. She was busy putting her things away and I was leaving the class and I opened the door and she was the next person coming out. So I held the door for her. And as she got to the door and touched the door, she said, thank you so much for holding the door for me. And that threw me because I wasn't expecting such a surprised response. And I said, no, my pleasure. And then I had an opportunity to introduce my name and she said her name. And so we were walking out of the gym together. I think that's just it, right? It's the leading of the Holy Spirit in the moment that is required. Because as we're leaving, I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, offer to pray for her. Now, that is not something I would normally do from the get-go, but I just felt so strongly, oh, wow, okay, this is a quickening from the Holy Spirit. He must have prepared her well enough to be able to receive this. So I'm just going to be obedient. So I said, hey, I know this sounds odd, but I just feel like I need to pray for you. Is there something that you really need prayer for today? And she goes, oh, Nalini. And she just poured out her heart, this very, very heavy situation that she's been navigating at home, which explained the heaviness that I felt when she walked into the room. And so we literally just sat on the doorstep of the gym and had this most incredible time of prayer. And I just very sensitively prayed into the situation for her. And learned later that she's a Muslim woman. And we just had this most incredible encounter. But I really do want to speak to, it's the leading of the Holy Spirit in the moment. So tuning into his voice and stepping into those scenarios with, Lord, you've got to help me. You've got to give me the words. I need to know what to say here so that I don't mess this up in the flesh. I want to be led of your Spirit in this case.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great answer. Great answer. Let's go back because I'm a little bit curious now about this whole area of identity because it's such a big thing. What are some leading questions? So I've got non-Christians in my world. What are the type of questions that can get the conversation started so that we can start talking about this with people? Obviously, you stated earlier things like what brings you joy. What are some other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will quite often ask leading questions like, how are things at home? What's happening in your world? What's going on? How are the kids? How are they tracking at school? How's the marriage? How's, things with hubby and with your partner and things at work, because quite often what happens is people will then want to open up and share, because obviously this relationship has been forged. They find you to be a safe space. And so they start to open up. Things on the marriage front are really not great. Just, we're constantly bickering with one another. Things aren't okay. And so they're addressing the symptom that they're currently experiencing, right? The scar on the leg, as it were. But what I will then quite often do is, as they're sharing, I'm praying in the meantime, and I'm asking the Lord to give me insight from a spiritual standpoint. Lord, what is happening in the spirit realm in this circumstance that is resulting in this outworking, right? This symptom that they are currently facing. And it's so interesting because 99% of the time, this is just from my own experience. And look, I'd love to hear from you as well, what it's like for you. But 99% of the time, there is an issue and there's this expectation that everybody else around me is the problem.
Right.
And so I will always bring the conversation back to, okay, I wonder what is required in terms of my responsibility to this symptom. What am I adding that's fueling this symptom? And what can I personally do different to see this symptom eradicated? And more often than not, it will ultimately lead back to, oh my goodness, okay, there was some major issues in the marriage of my mum and dad growing up that's been modeled to me that I'm now walking into my marriage carrying and replicating. And so we're seeing history repeat, and then when they wake up to the reality that, oh, hang on a second, I've also got a part to play in this. It then steers us later down the line into these conversations of, okay, well, who am I outside of the molding and the conditioning that took place by those who were an authority over me when I was younger? Because all these experiences and all these people influence who I ultimately am today.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so it's really those diagnostic questions, but in this case, that question going back to have that person be a little bit more responsible in the situation that they raise.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've had conversations with mums and dads. The teenagers, oh my goodness, they're just an absolute nightmare. And then we just can't connect, and we just, there's constant, tension between us, and we just can't seem to figure it out. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so what happened in your last conversation? And then she'll go, oh, well, I was only joking. I only told her she was fat. And then she stormed off and had an absolute wobbly. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, wow. I don't know if I'd be too happy if I was on the receiving end of being told that I'm fat. And then it kind of triggers a bit of a, oh, okay, yes, no. Yeah, no, maybe that was a little bit, too much. I hated it when that used to happen to me. Okay, so now we're seeing the pattern of history here. So there's some cycles that now need to break, And so then we end up down this deep rabbit hole of, oh my goodness, this was something that I lived through. And now I'm just repeating it because that's all I know. I don't know any different.
It's all about who we are, for sure, that identity, how we're shaped by our past. Where does God intersect all of that? Who are we in his eyes? What if people say to you or say to me when I start to go down this line of bringing God into a conversation, what if someone says, I actually don't believe in God, so why should God define who I am?
Yeah. I get that. I understand that. And, you've maybe never had a relationship with him or known anything of him. But, it's like me introducing you to a friend of mine. You don't know that friend of mine from Adam. But there's no denying that that person exists if I'm about to introduce you to somebody that I know. And so I know him personally, and I've seen his transformative power in my life. And I can tell you now, I am not who I am today, who I was, 10 years ago until I had this encounter with him. And so I find that by putting it in that context, that it's throwing it back on, I have mutual respect towards you and what you believe. And I want to know more about what you believe, because it also challenges my thought processes and what I believe. But at the same time, I want to be able to introduce you to some concepts and to some ideas and maybe, some people and a certain God to just challenge your thought processes and your beliefs. Because as our friendship grows and matures and nurtures, and they understand that I am a safe space for them, regardless of whether they come to know my God or don't, oh my goodness, then having the conversation around spirituality is no threat. anymore. They don't feel threatened by it. They don't now start feeling closed off to want to converse with you, because we've got one objective, which is to get them into the, gates of heaven. No, the Spirit of God is doing that work on the inside. We just have to be attuned to him and to his leading in terms of what to say and when to be quiet.
Yes, 100%. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. I've got lots to think about. About identity and how do we talk about that with non-Christians. And it's also probably raised some questions for you as a listener, maybe around this identity piece yourself. And so I want to encourage you to jump on to Nalini's website, Nalini Tranquim. That's ending in QUIM, tranquim.com, nalinitranquim.com. And there's a lot of resources there from Nalini that you can engage with. So Nalini, thank you so much. How fascinating. And thank you for giving your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.